Hello, sports fans, and welcome to Let Me Speak, the show that shares sports' biggest headlines explained, uninterrupted, and maybe a little audacious. I'm Joe Braverman, and today's topics we'll be discussing are
the storylines to watch for during the second half of the MLB season. Plus, KD or Spida, which superstar is more likely to be traded before the season begins? And what's next for Kyler Murray after signing a lucrative deal with the Cardinals? It's episode 80 of Let Me Speak, and it starts right now. We are back once again here on Thursday, July 21st, 2022 for the landmark 80th episode of Let Me Speak. Thank you everyone for tuning in wherever you are getting this podcast. I can't believe we hit 80 episodes. Unbelievable. And we were supposed to have a celebration last week, but some scheduling conflicts. But we are here. We're here to celebrate, and I wish it was a busier week. Obviously, this time of the year is usually pretty quiet in the sports world, but hey, we are here. We continue to roll along. We are celebrating 80 episodes. I'm still blown away that we have reached this far. I appreciate everyone who has liked and subscribed to this podcast, who continues to follow week after week, follows us on all our social media platforms. You have no idea how much the support means to me as I hopefully look to kickstart what is to be a great career in sports media. And obviously, I said that the sports week should be busier for 80 episodes. I wish the weather was cooler because let me tell you, it is hot. And I'm not just talking like here in Massachusetts, the entire country is dealing with it. Heck, the entire world is dealing with it. The UK and England, everywhere in Europe, it's hot as heck. I got my ceiling fan going right now. I've turned the AC off though, for just a little bit because I don't want to make it seem like I'm screaming or anything. Plus that background noise, at least in my eyes, would get kind of annoying. So I turned it off for the time being, but it's getting turned right back on. And, the heat wave hopefully will end this weekend, but I'm done with it. I'm done with 90-degree weather. I mean, we've been dealing with like 3 or 4 straight days of it. There's still 3 more days afterwards. It's not fun. It is not fun to be in a heat wave. I'd rather be nice and cool than hot and sweaty. But it will end, and I can't say anything. I mean, we got the Texas, Oklahoma dealing with hundreds right now, so can't complain, too much about it, but, just hope everyone out there is staying cool, got the ACs going. If you don't got any ACs, get to any kind of place that gives you warmth, stay hydrated, obviously, just all the basic tools to quell the heat wave that's going on planet Earth, basically. Hope everyone is being able to maintain that. But not only is the temperature heating up, the action is going to be heating up as well, as the second half of the regular season for the MLB is about to get underway. We got a couple games going on right now. It's a 6-game slate. I'm looking at it. 2 doubleheaders, Detroit and Oakland, New York and Houston. They've got some doubleheaders going. But really, as I said, it's kind of quiet. I'm just grasping at straws for what we can talk about this week. But let's preview the second half of that MLB season, because I really want to look at, what could be making headlines as the season goes along. And obviously, the big headline is 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, it'll be the trade deadline. So that'll be a whole segment within itself. But you also have teams that have had a strong first half, but we've seen in recent history that it's good to have a strong first half, but if you don't have a strong second half, that'll do you in. And ultimately, the big thing I'm looking at are the 2 New York teams, the Yankees and the Mets, because they've both been very, very strong in this second half. The Yankees right now with the best record in all of baseball at 64-28. And you got the New York Mets who are leading the NL East with the second best record in the National League at 58-35. And I really want to see if those New York teams are going to still reign supreme. Because, I mean, the Yankees before the All-Star break lost 5 of their last 8, but they took 2 out of 3 in the last series at home against the Red Sox. And I look at the Yankees and how well that lineup is constructed. And I said it last year that the only problem that this team had was their pitching. And they seem to have turned it around with a lockdown bullpen, like Clay Holmes as your closer. Wandy Peralta is involved in there. And then obviously your starting rotation is just as good. Obviously, Garrett Cole leading the charge. But how much of that comes back down to earth? I mean, this was a team that was on pace. And I don't really like that stat that they're on pace because no one is ever on pace. But they were on pace to match or be better than arguably the greatest team in MLB history, the 1927 New York Yankees. So if you're in that same sort of conversation, you're doing something right. But they're sort of, I think they're going to come back down to earth. I still expect them to win the AL East. But the division is just getting tougher. I mean, you got the Orioles who have all of a sudden come out hot, back to 500. The Red Sox can turn things around in a blink of an eye. The Blue Jays are still the Blue Jays with those powerful bats, and the Rays continue to fly under the radar. The AL East is, without a doubt, the toughest division in all of baseball. And if the Yankees can at least stay afloat, because they built a big enough lead, just looking quickly at the divisions, they're 13 up on the Tampa Bay Rays. So they have plenty of room to work with, and it would take a historic collapse to see them not win that division. So how well do the Yankees maintain this spot? You know, that I think is going to be key. But then a subliminal thing within that Yankees organization is Aaron Judge. You know, how much money is he going to continue to drive with his value? Because, I mean, come on, this dude is leading the league in home runs. He's in the top 5 in RBIs. He's one of the, I would call the front runner for the AL MVP, if you ask me. And we heard about, you know, the figures that the Yankees offered him. And Aaron Judge said no to that at the beginning of the year. So if Judge continues to play like this, he's going to get much more than what the Yankees initially offered him, which I believe was $230 million, something like that, over 13 years, something like that. I think this is a $300 million hitter. Whoever gives it to him, I have no idea. But Aaron Judge, if he continues to rake and hit the ball the way he's doing, he's going to get a fat paycheck, whether it's from the Yankees or whether it's from some other team. I don't know. But the Yankees should look at this guy and say, this guy is the foundation and can get us going for another 5 to 10 years. And you don't want to lose that at all. At all. So how well does the Yankees do? I don't know. But the Mets, I think, have got some bigger problems considering the division that they play in. Is just as, you know, it's not the AL East, but it's still just as tough when you got the Braves nipping on your heels, the Phillies who are going to get healthy, and then the Marlins and the Nats who are walkovers, but not easy walkovers. Looking at the Mets, you know, they started 38-19. They've been 20-15 since then, but they've got a lot more depth than they did in recent memories. You've got reinforcements coming with Jacob deGrom, who eventually, hopefully, will return from his rehab stint and get back into that starting rotation. Put him alongside Max Scherzer, who's come back healthy and is back to Max Scherzer-like pitching. I think the Mets, I hate to say it like at this moment because it's still the halfway point, but I think right now they're an early favorite to make it to the World Series. I really do, considering when you have not that many options, I would say. I think just the bats that they have are a lot better than what they had last year, and their pitching has got more reinforcements on the way. So I think, early on, I would say the Mets are the favorite, but there's still a lot of things to happen. I mean, you obviously have the defending champs in the Atlanta Braves who are showing, hey, we don't need Freddie Freeman. I mean, they really should have Freddie Freeman. But they still, they brought back Ronald Acuna Jr. He's healthy and he's back to his ways. You got Austin Riley, William Contreras, guys who made the All-Star team. Dansby Swanson, should mention him. And then you got great pitching like Max Fried. You're hopefully going to get Charlie Morton back. This is a team that I'm not going to say the Mets are going to run away with this division, even though I did say they'd be my favorites coming out of the National League, but it's not going to be easy because everyone sleeps on the Braves. Considering what they did last year, they were in like an 89 win team that won the East, and they made it all the way to the World Series, knocking off the Astros. So I think you can't doubt the Atlanta Braves. I think they're going to find a way to get into the playoffs and probably have a good run. I think they can get at least to the divisional round. I don't see them getting bounced in the wild card. But I think they can make a run. They can really make a run if they get hot. But I mean, they can't sit pretty either because the Phillies are right behind them. They're going to get healthy. They still have Kyle Schwarber, who's second in the majors in home runs. You're going to get Bryce Harper back eventually. This is just, it's a lot of inconsistencies with the Phillies that, to me, makes it hard to say, oh yeah, they're definitely going to make the playoffs. I can't say that, but they're not going to be a pushover like the Marlins or the Nats in that division. So the Phillies are just as tough, and they could easily get into that wild card spot. Because I mean, just looking quickly at the wild card standings in the National League, you've got in 1, 2, 3 the Braves, the Padres, and the Phillies, but they have the tiebreaker over the Cardinals, and the Cardinals can get just as hot and even come through in that division. When you have Goldschmidt and Arenado and all those guys, so it's not going to be easy for the Phillies, but they can sneak in there. They can really sneak in there. And then out in the West, I would say the Dodgers. It's a toss-up. I did say the Mets are early favorites, but if it wasn't them, it would be the Dodgers right now. Best record in the NL. And, do they make a big move? Because remember, the big move last year at the deadline was Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. And then, just slightly, grabbing Albert Pujols. And they are 10 up on the Padres. So it should be no question that they win the division. It's just a matter of, do they get any kind of reinforcement? You still have Bellinger and Betts and Muncy and the Turners. How do they address it? Do they make another move, to get some reinforcement? I think they get another arm in the bullpen, because I think what they thought they were getting in Craig Kimbrell didn't turn out to be as their closer. Obviously, it's hard to replace Kenley Jansen. So if you ask me, I think a bullpen arm is going to be very, very important for the Dodgers to try and add at the deadline. But then you've also got, the Giants were a hot team last year. Obviously, they're not that same way this year, but they can flip the switch just like that with the kind of team that they are. And then you have the Padres, who are going to get Fernando Tatis Jr. Back, I think, in the lineup. It might be August or September, something like that. But there are rumors that they could be in on Juan Soto. And if you put Juan Soto in that lineup with Manny Machado, Jake Cronenworth, just to name a few guys, I think the Padres can be dangerous. They can be dangerous. And it's a shame on me, because I was sleeping on the Padres considering what they did last year with all the hype that they had. They were going to challenge the Dodgers in the division. And then sure enough, they don't even make the playoffs. So, it's my fault for sleeping on the Padres. But I think they've opened everyone's eyes again. And it's a matter of, can they get to the postseason and how far can they go? Because we know they can do it, but it's that postseason success that has eluded them since basically this whole new era, I guess, when you have Tatis and Machado. But it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the second half of the MLB season, because we know that legacies and history is made when it comes down to the last half of the baseball year. So as I said, we are grasping for straws at this kind of week in sports. And something I wanted to bring up over the last couple of weeks was the NBA, because the free agency market in the offseason has basically been at a standstill since two of the top players have. One of them's requested a trade. One of them is involved in trade talks, and that's Kevin Durant and Donovan Mitchell. And for the purpose of this week, I just want to talk about, who's more likely to get dealt first, who's going to start the year with their original team. That's something I really wanted to think about, because you've got two totally different scenarios. You've got Kevin Durant, who had championship aspirations when he signed with the Brooklyn Nets, and the farthest they've gone is the semifinals. And granted, they were a big toe away from the semifinals, but the results say that they haven't made an NBA finals. And what's going on in that Nets organization, basically since Durant signed, I mean, you knew he was going to be a redshirt in his first year, coming off the torn Achilles, comes back this year or the following year, looks like his old self, but again, still dealing with injury history. And then this past year was just a whole lot of inconsistencies. And I think, I keep saying it all attributes to Kyrie Irving, considering how basically it seems undedicated he is to playing. When you have in that 2020-21 year, where he's basically taking a week off because he wants to, and then, he's heels deep in the mud on his vaccine stance regarding New York, the vaccine mandates and all that, which is a whole other topic. But just the mannerisms that Kyrie provided, it just seems to have rubbed Kevin Durant the wrong way. And that led him to ultimately requesting this trade. And I think the Nets sort of looked at themselves in the mirror and said, we basically said we would do anything to win a championship, and it hasn't come to fruition. Considering that the Nets haven't gone past the second round. I mean, that first year, they were in the bubble. Kyrie didn't even go, gets bounced early on. 2021, they get bounced with James Harden, and Kyrie wasn't playing because he was hurt. And then this year, just a whole lot of ins and outs, Durant being hurt, Kyrie only playing half the games, and then the Ben Simmons drama, all that kind of stuff like that. And then they get swept in the first round. So if you ask me, like, it makes sense why Durant would be asking for a trade, but the problem is he's locked up for another 4 years. In today's NBA, guys can sign, 20-year deals, and they could say tomorrow, I want to be gone. So that's why everyone's so hesitant to probably make a deal. Not just that, but the Nets asking price has not moved to, we want an established star, role players, and multiple draft picks. And I think you can go back to the initial Utah trade for Rudy Gobert, where Danny Ainge took back 4 first rounders. I think it was 4 or 5 first rounders from Minnesota. And that's basically been the benchmark right now for any kind of trade, any Kyrie trade, Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant trade. And teams are unwilling to do that. Organizations, general managers, they're sort of looking at situations in the past. Look at the James Harden situation or this situation with Durant and Irving, and saying, wow, they can hold us hostage essentially if they want out. So we don't want to take that risk. We don't want to take that gamble. Sometimes they just don't have the pieces. As I said, the Nets asking price hasn't moved, and no team has the pieces for weird managerial reasons where it's like, because DeAndre Ayton is a restricted free agent, he couldn't be traded to the Suns, and Phoenix doesn't want to give up Devin Booker. Bam Adebayo can't be on the same roster as Ben Simmons. And they don't want to give up Tyler Hero or anything like that. So it's really, really complicated, the situation in Brooklyn right now, considering, trying to get rid of Kevin Durant, trying to trade him. And more is coming out that it's more likely he's going to stay with the Nets. Like the Nets are going to keep that core of Durant, Irving, and Simmons, at least for the start of the season. Now, I don't know how that's going to translate. I mentioned this to one of my fellow producers over at WEI, is that this is still a team that can be maybe not championship contenders, considering like the sort of chaotic situation in the front office and in the organization, with Durant asking for a trade, and Irving, all that. Basically, Irving picked up his option because he didn't have any other choice. But I think that it's that sort of front office thing that would make me think, okay, maybe they're sort of a 4-5 seed, maybe not like a championship contender. Because I think the East, basically, it starts with the Bucks and the Celtics, not in any particular order, followed by the Sixers and the Heat, and then everyone else. So, I think I have more faith that Durant actually stays with the Nets than gets traded before the start of the year. But that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is the Utah situation. And as I mentioned, it was sort of that Rudy Gobert trade with the Wolves from the Jazz that sort of set this benchmark as to basically Utah going in a full rebuild, and why asking prices are so high. And we've heard reports that Danny Ainge has asked for 6 first-rounders, considering the fact that he got 4 first-rounders from the Minnesota trade with Gobert. And we're hearing that with the Knicks is the predominant team in trade discussions with Donovan Mitchell. Now, before I dive deep into Mitchell, I'm wondering why Danny Ainge would want to blow everything up or have that opportunity. I get he has a history of it with blowing up 2007, before Garnett and Allen and that big 3 with the Celtics. But then when he blew things up and traded Garnett and Allen to Brooklyn, and eventually those picks and players turned into predominant guys like Isaiah Thomas, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, just to name a few guys. So I get it. And, you're not called Trader Danny for no reason. But the fact that Donovan Mitchell is a 25-year-old superstar who's, I think, probably hitting the prime of his career, you don't want to build around that. I mean, outside, you don't have Gobert, but you still have Bojan Bogdanovic as a great shooter. You have Jordan Clarkson coming off the bench. And even the pieces that you picked up, Patrick Beverley, we've seen as a dog on defense, Vanderbilt, Okogie, or not Okogie, excuse me. But just a couple of other guys. Like Utah can still be a play-in team, considering what that Western Conference looks like. I mean, the Lakers are still the Lakers. The Spurs are still the Spurs. And the Blazers don't look like they're getting any better. So this is a Utah team that could still make the playoffs, and maybe not for a full-fledged rebuild. And I think they could still be good if they just add a few pieces surrounding Donovan Mitchell. I think that's the most important thing. So I don't know why Danny Ainge would want to have any possibility of trading Donovan Mitchell, because I think he's a great piece to have. And granted, he's sort of a defensive liability with his size. But still, I would rather take Donovan Mitchell than probably a good 60% of the league on my roster, if you ask me. That's what I would say. And it seems like, just listening to reports that Mitchell will eventually become a Knick, but it's just a matter of like when it's going to happen. So I think that to answer the overall premise, I think Mitchell is more likely to be traded than Kevin Durant, because eventually, as time goes on, the price is going to decline. Either that or the Knicks are going to be suckered to be like, sure, we care about winning so much, we'll give you a 6 first-rounders and Julius Randle and Obi Toppin and a bunch of other guys. The Knicks are just that dumb of an organization, because, I mean, even if they do get Mitchell and they pair him with Jalen Brunson, still don't think the Knicks are going anywhere, if you ask me. They haven't gotten anywhere close to that upper echelon of the Eastern Conference. But it is still only July. Camps don't get underway until September, preseason in October. So there's still a lot of things that can happen in this offseason of the NBA. As I continue to stress over and over and over, this week is very, very slow. Not a lot of action going on, but that's not stopping us from finding a couple other topics to dive into in a hurry. So let's get right into quick hits. And we start with the big news that came out today as we're recording. Kyler Murray is back with the Cardinals, and he is there for a long time right now. 5 years, $230.5 million, including $160 million guaranteed. I think I read that like that was with injury, and 105 was guaranteed if he did get hurt or something like that. But good for Arizona, because Kyler is arguably, if he continues on this path, he's been the best Cardinals quarterback in a very long time. You know, with no disrespect to Kurt Warner in those last couple of years or Carson Palmer, but this guy is just so electric. And with his overall play, I think he's earned it. The problem that he's been dealing with is that second half of the stretch with him and Cliff Kingsbury. Is they've gotten off to hot starts, but they start to falter near the end. And hopefully with a couple more years in the league for both Cliff Kingsbury, who's still a relatively young guy, and with Kyler Murray, that they can hopefully develop this kind of maturity and understand, okay, this is what has to happen in the second part of the season, because it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And you obviously saw what happened in a couple of games against the Rams. Just that second half of the season was not pretty for Arizona at all. And that was a team I thought was going to be really good. You know, I think they started like 10-1 or something like that, and then they faltered to 12-5 or something like that. So I hope that Kyler does have success with this new contract. And luckily, everyone in Arizona and who are fans of the Cardinals can take a big sigh of relief, because Kyler is here to stay. And he's not the only superstar that re-signed. James Harden re-signed and took a substantial pay cut, I might add, with the Philadelphia 76ers. 2 years and $68.6 million. So if you do that math, that's basically $33 million a year, which is much less than what he was making when he initially was traded to the 76ers. And I gotta be honest, this is something I was not expecting from James Harden. You know, considering this is a guy who basically forced his way out of Houston, forced his way out of Brooklyn, and has shown to be a very selfish player, has taken the selfless route and has told Philly basically, I'll take the pay cut, give me whatever's left, and go make a championship team. Because I honestly think he sort of looked in the mirror and saw what he did in the playoffs and saying, okay, maybe I'm not this elite scorer that I used to be when I was with the Rockets, but he's still a good facilitator. He is a triple-double threat, and I think he's understanding that he himself is not going to carry a team, and he's not that same guy that he used to be. So that's why he took a pay cut and brought in guys like Daniel House and PJ Tucker. You know, maybe that opens the door for some more signings out there. So props to James Harden for taking the selfless route. And who knows, maybe that leads to a championship. You know, maybe, as I said earlier on, I put them in like the top 3 of the East with Milwaukee and Boston. But who knows, this deal could lead to a possible ring for the 76ers. As it seems like it's been for the whole month in the world of golf, more names are leaving the PGA to join the LIV Tour, which is backed by Saudi Arabia, which is why there's a bunch of controversy. The names that we have seen recently, Henrik Stenson, no longer the European Ryder Cup captain because he has left for the LIV Tour. David Faraday, who's one of the top analysts for NBC when they have golf coverage, he's gone as an analyst. And now there's reports that Charles Barkley is in talk for an analyst role, possibly with the LIV Tour. We've heard talks that he's going to play in the LIV Tour Pro-Am upcoming. And I'm honestly surprised that Chuck would sort of take this route, considering that, he is well beloved. And I thought for him, image would be very, very important. He does have no filter, obviously, and he's got eyes, not just from the basketball world, but the entire sports world are centered around him. And this is a guy who makes a headline, it seems like, once a week for whether he's got any kind of talk or if he has a comedic moment on Inside the NBA. It surprises me that Chuck would be sort of in talk. I mean, he's in talks with LIV. It doesn't mean he's, going over there. He's just talking right now. And we heard today that, he's ready for any kind of brushback or blowback that he gets with any kind of commercial deals that he has. But I like Barkley. I'm not going to dispute, why, because everyone's got their different reasons for leaving the LIV Tour, for the LIV Tour, I should say, from the PGA. But it makes sense why LIV would go after Charles Barkley, because he's a name that attracts eyeballs, and that's essentially what LIV is looking for. I mean, they don't have a TV deal yet, but that's probably upcoming. They continue to get more names from the PGA. They might get Cameron Smith, who just won the British Open. So there's still, the LIV continues to grow, and if they get Charles Barkley as an analyst for some of their tournaments, it's going to change the game for the little feud between PGA and LIV. Quickly back to baseball, and as I briefly mentioned Juan Soto on the trade market, well, why is he on the trade market is wondering. Well, if you've been living under a cave, the Washington Nationals offered him 15 years and $440 million as an extension, and he rejected it. So what does Washington do? They go right away and say, we're going to trade him. We're not going to pay that. So I'm trying to do the math really quickly in my head. That's roughly about 33 million or 29 million, I would guess. So that's, it's less than, just thinking of numbers, Stanton, Harper, Tatis, Jr. So I think he's looking for that average annual value. I don't think he's looking for like a long-term commitment. And honestly, the Nationals are just making it from bad to worse because they had to fly him commercial to Los Angeles for the All-Star break. I mean, this is just another situation that Washington just continues to fumble. You got to keep in mind, this was a team that won the World Series 3 years ago in 2019 with Juan Soto as a rookie, basically, in like his first year or two. But they lost Bryce Harper for nothing. They lost Anthony Rendon for nothing. I don't think they've got a whole lot back for Scherzer and Trey Turner. So if Juan Soto is that last piece that goes, you're telling me that 3 years after winning a World Series, the whole core of that team is gone. Like, what is Washington doing? They don't have a future. This is a rebuild that's probably going to take about 5 to 10 years if Juan Soto is on the trade market. So I get why the Nationals are doing it, because they want to get something back, because they've been blown up for letting some superstars go. But hey, that's just business, and the Nationals are going to be stinking for a whole lot longer if Juan Soto is no longer on the team. Lastly, we go to another contract talk, but this one has been officially signed by a head coach in college football. Kirby Smart just got a whole lot richer from the University of Georgia, signing an extension for 10 years and $112.5 million with the University of Georgia. And hey, if you just won the national championship, it makes sense why you're getting paid this much. It makes sense. Because Kirby Smart, I think, in terms of head coaches in college football, probably top 5, if you ask me. I'd put him up there with Saban, Dabo Swinney. For the moment, I would say Lincoln Riley. and then Jim Harbaugh, just naming quick ones off the top of my head in no particular order, but he is up there. I mean, he won a national championship. He beat Alabama. So it makes sense why Georgia wants to say, you know what, this is our guy. This is our recruiter, our coach. This is a guy who's going to continue to shine that spotlight on University of Georgia football. So I totally get why Kirby Smart is taking this kind of pay raise. But if I'm any kind of player, who's got like any kind of NIL deals, I'm sort of looking at that and saying, wait a minute, our coach is getting paid that much? Where are the funds for us players or anything like that? So if I was like playing for Georgia, I'd be going up to like, campus and the boosters or whatever and saying like, where's that kind of money for us? Huh? How about that? But Georgia is in a good state, coming off of a national championship. So if they want to pay their head coach who just won a title and beat the almighty Alabama Crimson Tide, have at it. Have at it, if you ask me. This is an organization and a school that I think is going to be good for a couple more years now that Kirby Smart is locked up. And that is a wrap up on this week's edition of Quick Hits. It's the time of the show where we get into our Let's Get Local segment of the week. And this one, again, subdued because of a slow week in sports. But we have to talk Red Sox. And that's all we're going to talk about in this segment. Because let's be honest, it is not pretty. Not pretty on the field, not pretty off the field. And this is something I've wanted to touch on for quite a bit of time. Because we were off last week and I was going to talk about, this team is struggling, what they were doing on the field. But now more developments are coming off the field and we're starting to hear it from outside sources. I mean, there was a bunch of quotes by John Henry. We heard a little bit from Chaim Bloom a little bit and the players. So, it's basically, this is going to be two separate entities for the Sox. So let's talk about what they're doing on the field. And what they're doing on the field stinks right now, okay? Absolutely stinks. No one in that lineup outside of the guy you're supposed to be paying, Rafael Devers, is doing anything. You're getting no power from your 3, 4, 5, 6 hitter. Basically, your middle of the lineup, which is your supply for power, is not providing any power. Yeah, they're getting hits and they're getting on base, but the teams, when you put them in the 3 spot or the 4 spot, are looking for long bombs. They're looking for homers. They're looking for multiple RBIs. And no one is doing that outside of Rafael Devers. JD is, I don't know if age is catching up to him or something like that, but he's basically swinging at everything and is not barely making any contact. Xander Bogaerts has 7 home runs this year, I believe. 7. Just getting the number real quick. It's nice to have a 313 average, but if you're not hitting any home runs, you're screwed. Essentially, you're essentially screwed. I think Bogart's like 7 home runs has to be like within like the past month or so, but just no, it's 7 on the year. I mean, come on, look at home runs right now. I'm just looking at it real quick. Rafi Devers has 22. Trevor Story has 15, but he's only hitting 221. Okay, JD has 9 home runs. Bogarts has 7. Verdugo has 6. This is not a major league lineup, okay? If you take out Rafi Devers in that lineup, this is not a major league lineup. Jarren Durant at that leadoff spot is coming down to earth. He's not getting on base as much. You've got Bobby Dahlbeck and Franchi Cordero who can't hit for crap right now, and it's an absolute shame that either of them has to play first base, okay? You got Jackie Bradley Jr. who can't hit the side of a boat right now, or side of a barn. I think that's the old expression. He's hitting 202. Dahlbeck is hitting 205. Okay. And I get there's a bunch of injuries and stuff like that. You have no Arroyo, you have no Kike in your lineup. But still, your power hitters, the guys who should be there, It's so frustrating. And obviously the pitching is doing as much as they can, but look at the buzzsaws that they've been hitting. They've hit the Rays, the Blue Jays, the Yankees multiple times. It's I'll talk about it with like upper management, but this is where it all circles back to. But come on. I mean, look at what's happened since that sweep against the Guardians. They were 42-31 before then. Now they're 48-45. You want to do the math real quick? That means they're 8-14 in their last 22 games. 8-14 against division teams. They have not won a division series, or they haven't won a series against teams in their division. That includes the Orioles. And you got them at the weakest point at the beginning of the year. Okay? Now you have to play the Orioles, and it's no longer a walk in the park. Okay? This is why this team is struggling, because they actually have to play teams in their division. Now, granted, every team in the division is, tops. As I said earlier, it's the top division in baseball. But if you're getting blown out in games like this, I mean, look at those Yankee games, losing 12-5, losing 14-1, losing 13-2, when you have your top pitchers like Nick Pivetta on the mound and Chris Sale, which, by the way, he's now gone, after thinking that was a life. That was an injection right then and there. And then you have these low scoring games, like against the Rays. You lose 3-2, you lose 4-1, you lose 5-4, because your lineup can't do anything and they can't hit for power. So I just don't know what Chaim Bloom is thinking of. And that segues into the next part of this, is what is management doing? I feel like Chaim Bloom is basically the puppet, and John Henry is sort of that puppet master saying, do this, do that, do this, do that. Okay? Because what does he do? He's got a great hitter at first base. Granted, he's not the top defensive first baseman you want there, but you've got a hitter who is well-disciplined like Kyle Schwarber, who can hit for power, who can get on base. And what do? You just let him walk. You only give him like a minimal amount, and you let him sign for the Phillies for like $20 million. You could have easily afforded that. But instead, Chaim Bloom decides to go to the bargain bin and goes for a bunch of discount players who there's a reason why they're only worth $2 million and $4 million a year. I'm talking guys like Jake Diekman, guys like Matt Strahm, just little guys like that. And you're telling me that, this team isn't playing well with what I gave them? I mean, come on, Chaim Bloom. Like, this literally frustrates me to the point where if I could curse out on this podcast, I would. There'd be a lot of F-bombs and S-bombs going out there, but I wouldn't be so mad at Chaim Bloom if I didn't hear from John Henry, okay? John Henry has talked about the situation with Rafi Devers, signing him to an extension, with Bogaerts, who is a free agency. You got to remember, in the offseason, before the season began, it was basically a 1-year boost, like a 1 year, I think like 20 million or 30 million extension that management offered Bogaerts, okay, which is basically a slap in the face. And John Henry, in this article in the Boston Globe, basically says, it's a two-way street. We're offering all we can, and it's up to the player to decide what they want. Really? When you offer a guy 1 year and $20 million for a guy who's been a part of your organization for basically 10 years, who helped provide you 2 World Series, you want to give him a 1-year extension? Now, granted, he's not playing well, but in terms of the locker room and the clubhouse and the leadership, that's a guy I want. I would want Xander Bogaerts in that clubhouse to be one of my leaders, okay? And if you're not going to respect him like that, it makes sense why you would want to walk out. Same thing with Rafi Devers. If you're not going to offer him the ballpark even close to what you see guys like Juan Soto or Giancarlo Stanton or Mike Trout or Fernando Tatis Jr., if you're not even coming close to that, you got to keep in mind, this guy is 24. He's going to be 25 years old. You sign him to that 10-year deal, you have a window of success for 10 years, okay? Chaim Bloom and John Henry have to realize this is Boston freaking Massachusetts. This is not Tampa Bay. This is not Texas. This isn't a low market team. This is the Boston Red Sox. This is a team that's paid like $35 million for guys that don't even deserve it. Like Manny Ramirez near the end of his career, like Pablo Sandoval, Hanley Ramirez, David Price, guys that don't deserve it and are from the outside. Where is your homegrown talent that you easily could have paid this money for? Mookie Betts, he's out in LA winning another World Series and making all-star teams. Andrew Benintendi, he's making an all-star team and is actually has good numbers now and didn't give up on him early. Jackie Bradley Jr. is back with you, but you should have given up on him early. And now you got a possibility that you're going to lose Devers, Bogarts. You might not re-sign Nathan Eovaldi. You're locked in with Chris Sale. You're telling me that core, I talked about it with the Nationals and Juan Soto, that this was a team that was only 4 years ago is coming off a World Series. And you're telling me that your core that you could have probably gone a good 10 years with is now going to be gone by the trade deadline in 2 weeks. Are you kidding me? Are you actually kidding me? John Henry has to be the most delusional owner in Boston right now. You look at guys who have been able to bridge it. Look at Robert Kraft and what the Patriots have done. They have bridged from Tom Brady to Mac Jones, and they are a playoff team. They're not a championship team, but at least they're being successful. Look at the Celtics, the way they've sort of retooled from Danny Ainge to Brad Stevens. They didn't blow things up, but it was one bad year where they still made the playoffs, but were able to retool and get to an NBA Finals. The Bruins are probably that slight argument because no one knows what Don Sweeney and Cam Neely are doing with that organization, but at least they make the playoffs and continue to be in the conversation, at least in the beginning of the year, as Stanley Cup contenders, in years past. So what the Red Sox are doing are basically saying, even though we are Boston, Massachusetts, and we're this high-priced team, we don't want to pay the luxury tax by a bunch of millions of dollars. We don't care. We'll sign guys from the outside or whatever to these big-time contracts. Our homegrown talent, we're just going to use as discount pieces to get better talent. That's not the way it works. It's not the way it works. Okay? So, I could talk about this week after week about how shameful it is that Chaim Bloom and John Henry have let the situation with not only Rafael Devers, but Xander Bogaerts go this far. Considering all the help that you need, okay? You already have Devers and Bogaerts. I get it. But you're going to disregard the bullpen and basically drive them away saying, oh, he's not doing anything. Remember last year at the deadline when all they did was get Kyle Schwarber, Austin Davis, and Hansel Robles? What did the clubhouse do? They basically were turned off from management saying, maybe this guy doesn't really care about us winning or not. Okay. So it could easily happen again. And if Chaim Bloom is not a buyer, and if he's a seller and he decides to get rid of Bogarts and he decides to get rid of Devers, his job should be fired on the spot. And honestly, I don't even know if John Henry should be an owner of the Red Sox, considering he's not investing enough in this team. Look at what he did in years past. He sold out. He has sold out for these championship teams. He went and signed a bunch of money for Daisuke. What did that lead to? A World Series in 2007. He sold out to go get JD Martinez and sign Chris Sale and all these other guys, making big trades to get Nathan Eovaldi and stuff like that. What does that lead to? A World Series. Okay. So you're telling me that now in 2022, when you've been doing this same strategy for roughly 20 years, you now want to stop paying money? Give me a better excuse than that. Come on. I'm just totally ranting right here. Now I'm just like getting everything off my chest. If at the trade deadline in 2 weeks, if Chaim Bloom does not do a single thing, and I think Red Sox fans understand this, that it's not players play the game, coaches coach, and managers manage, and the front office does whatever they want. But I think the majority of Red Sox fans look at what's happening up in the front office and says what they have set up for the Boston Red Sox, not just for this year, but for years to come, means that it's going to be a bunch of rebuilding years. Like, what year are you building for? Are you building for 2027 when Tristan Cassis comes up and maybe becomes an all-elite player? Like, it's ridiculous what management is doing right now. But hopefully things can turn around for the Red Sox. And it's nice in the second half where you open up with a 10-game homestand. I mean, you got your first three starting this weekend against Toronto, then you got Cleveland, and then you got Milwaukee. If you don't go 500, okay? If you don't go 500, season's over, okay? The division is just too tough right now. It's too tough. And if you can't come out of the whole year without winning one division series, I mean, you don't even deserve to be you don't even deserve to be playing, if you ask me. But there's so much to diagnose about the Red Sox. You know, I've gotten all I've gotten to get out, at least for this week. And I'm just looking forward to them getting back on the field and hopefully taking our mind off the chaos in the front office for the Red Sox. Finally, to wrap up our show, it's our LOL moment of the week. And this week is kind of a blessing in disguise because it's so quiet. You had the ESPYs go on. You know, everyone was able to attend because basically all the seasons were on break or off season. So we got to see a lot of great moments, which before we get into the LOL, I just got to say, Dick Vitale's speech probably is up there with Jim Valvano's Don't Ever Give Up speech. At the ESPY Awards. That's definitely up there. And then just a bunch of great moments to see the anniversary for Title IX, the tribute to Brittany Griner. I thought there were a lot of great moments, but I think there was one moment in particular that I think stands out for the LOL moment. And it might be a little 50-50 or whatever for if people found it funny or not, but I think it deserves the moment. So this week's LOL moment of the week goes to Draymond Green. So obviously the Warriors had to be at the ESPYs because they had just won the championship, and Steph Curry was the host, which, by the way, I'm going to add, he wasn't fantastic, but he wasn't horrible. I think he was just kind of the middle. I mean, it's a difficult task to ask athletes to sort of be like funny and be comedic and sort of like poke fun at themselves. I mean, we've seen it in award show past whenever athletes get involved, they sort of poke fun at themselves. Steph really didn't do that. He rather poked fun at everyone else, which, by the way, I'm salty about those couple Boston jokes that he made at the expense of Grant Williams, you know, saying, oh, I might let you wear this ring. And then he said, like, I'm the Boston Celtics daddy or something like that. But it's the moment with his teammate Draymond Green. So the segment has Steph Curry. He's going to present someone or introduce the next presenters, and he gets interrupted by the Draymond Green Show, which is his podcast. And he's sitting there with Lil Rel Howery. And honestly, Lil Rel made the segment because he had the one-liners. He was pretty funny in that segment. You know, my favorite was like, Khloe Kim, I like you because you got two Kardashian names. So that was pretty funny. But it's the moment where which basically ends it, and Steph brings out a security guy, and Draymond says, you know what, I've been kicked out of more important things. So I mean, that kind of flew over the audience's head because he was kind of getting up. It wasn't really like in the microphone or whatever, but I just thought the moment was like, you know, he can laugh at himself at least. And I don't know if Steph Curry was able to do that. You know, he had a segment where he was making jokes with his family, but he didn't really poke anything at himself. He took shots at LeBron and the Lakers. Obviously, I mentioned the Celtics. You know, he threw the Astros out there and the Sacramento Kings. So I didn't think he was a great host. My favorite segment, I will say, from the ESPYs was his moment with Jay Farrell, because Jay Farrell was funny as heck, saying, you know, Steph, you made it. the premise, it's kind of funny, but Farrell breaking out those impressions of Shannon Sharp and then Shaq and Barkley and Stephen A. Just Jay Farrell just makes me laugh every single time. But it's the moment that Draymond Green gets involved, decides that his podcast is going to interrupt the ESPYs. I thought was probably the funny moment from the whole show. Him and Lil Rel basically doing their own show. But I mean, it wasn't fantastic. I'm just gonna add it right there. It was not a fantastic show. It had the great moments, as I mentioned, like Dickie V, Title IX, all that kind of stuff. But for an LOL moment, I thought the best moment had to have been when Draymond Green interrupted and the quick one-liner about that. I was one of the few people who actually noticed that. I don't think anyone in the crowd noticed that when he said that line. But I was a big fan of that line. So Draymond, for poking fun at your podcast, interrupting your teammate Steph Curry, and just having some fun at the ESPYs, you have landed yourself into this week's LOL moment of the week. So that is a wrap up on this edition of Let Me Speak. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or watching us on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get it, and follow our pages on social media. That's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. All you got to do is search Let Me Speak Podcast. And remember, as always, if you got a point you got to get across, just let the whole world know. Shut up and let me speak.